It's a great pleasure to be here. I want to start by saying how impressed I am by being here these last few hours and seeing David Hochschild's talk and then the award ceremony that you folks had. That was really fun. And I'm going to make a couple of comments about teams because I really appreciate David's comments about how to make sure that we're collaborating as teams and that we're able to come together and celebrate our successes, and that we can also think about taking care of each other. I'm going to be talking about next-gen energy technologies, but I'm also going to be talking about last-gen, because I want to give you a little bit of a sense of our history. You heard from Andrew a few minutes ago. I want to thank the folks from the CCA's organization inviting me here today, and thank Andrew for that introduction, because it's great to see what a vibrant community this is. I haven't been to one of your conferences, and I'm going to try to get more people from Berkeley Lab here. So this is the picture that Andrew mentioned a few minutes ago about our history. And the lab was founded in 1931. The Manhattan Project started in 1941. So a lot of people, how many of you have seen the movie Oppenheimer? Good number of you. There on the bottom with his legs crossed, there's two guys with their legs crossed. The one on the left is Ernest Lawrence. The one on the very top with the pipe, the tall guy, that's Oppenheimer. So this is a picture of a particle accelerator that was a big magnet. And the magnet was created to accelerate particles and to understand the nature of matter. And UC Berkeley campus was too small to host these labs. So we were initially called the RAD lab, Radiation Lab. But now we're much bigger. We have almost 4,000 scientists and engineers and researchers. And we are one of 17 national labs. I know you heard from Steve English, my counterpart down at SLAC. But Ernest Lawrence really celebrated team science. So this picture is to get us thinking about where we've been and where we're going in the future. And I'm going to kind of walk you through some of this history and then with a look to the future. Andrew also mentioned Dr. Art Rosenfeld. If you've seen the movie, one of the scientists there was Enrico Fermi. Art Rosenfeld was Enrico Fermi's last grad student. He was a particle physicist, and during the oil embargo, he realized that the energy efficiency of buildings in the United States was a big problem. So the energy efficiency research programs that we do at the lab started in the oil embargo. Dr. Rosenfeld became known for something called the Rosenfeld effect, and the picture here is kilowatt hours per person. You can see from around the time of the oil embargo, the dark blue is California, and the red is the rest of the United States. So we were able in California to start investing in deep energy efficiency improvements with building codes, more efficient windows, more efficient heating and cooling systems. And we were able to flatten the energy per person for several decades. That's no longer flat. Today, it's increasing again because of electric vehicles, electrification, and data centers, and I'll touch on all of those. But the rest of the country continued to rise and is also flattening, and I'll show you a picture in a moment of where some of that is. But the important thing to remember is that we decoupled the use of the economy and energy, because the idea in the past was that you needed more energy to run the economy, but we want to change that. And we're now talking not about just how much energy you use, but when you use the energy. So I'll talk about load flexibility as well. This is a report from the White House on the long-term strategy of the United States supporting US decarbonization. And you'll see these sectors: transportation, buildings, industry, electricity, and then carbon capture and removal. The United States uses about 6 gigatons of carbon per year. California is about 0.4 gigatons. So we have about 10% of the US population, but we do not use 10% of the carbon. We're less than that. And I want to talk both about California and the entire US. The goal is to be net carbon zero by 2050, and we have to do work across all of our sectors. You know about buildings. The CCAs have vibrant programs in energy efficiency. We need to continue to invest in electrification, in better heat pumps, but at the same time, you want to put good windows in. So when we started our work in the 70s, that was one of the first things we did, was investing in the science of windows and creating the way you rate the performance of a window. So now when you buy an Energy Star window, they have something called the National Fenestration Rating Council, which you can buy a label on the window, and we created the science of measuring the performance of those windows. We are doing a lot of work in industry to try to decarbonize the industry. And of course, in transportation, we are working on EVs and thinking about the electric grid and the smart grid. And you saw from Commissioner Hochschild's slides all of the work in renewables. So we'll talk about those as well. This is a report that was published last week. This is called the Q's report. This is grid connection requests have grown 30% in 2023 amidst reforms aimed to relieve the backlogs. So let me walk you through these numbers. What's happening is we have delays in our ability to build out our change to renewable energy systems. California, that yellow line is the peak load. In 2022, we used about 52 gigawatts here in California. That was September 6th, really hot day. That was a day where your demand response programs helped save the grid. There was a text, an Amber Alert sort of text that went out to all of you, and we were able to not black out the grid, and I'll talk a little about how that works, but above that is the installed capacity of the grid. So we have these resource adequacy requirements, and you're building a grid to support those peak loads, and that dark blue one includes, it's not a coincidence with the peak hours, so it's a little bit higher than that 52 gigawatts, which we peaked on in 2022. And then the red line is the imported capacity contribution. And the very top, that 523 gigawatts, that's the number of projects that are waiting to come onto the grid in California. So this is a really important piece of research that we do. And you can see MISO, PJM, ERCOT, and other of the grids around the country. California has a big backlog, and there is reform at the CAISO to try to speed up bringing these renewables onto the grid. This is from our Electricity Markets and Policy Department, which Andrew was part of, so emp.lbl.gov, Q's, and you can download this report. It came out last week. This week, we just published today a report on a strategy to improve the capacity of the transmission system around the United States. And you see in the New York Times a few days ago a study about reconductoring that Amol Padkey, some Berkeley scientists on campus as well as LBL have been collaborating on. So we're really interested in making sure we unlock the potential here. The solar, about half of that 500 gigawatts is storage. So I'm going to talk about storage for a few minutes, but when we think about changing the transmission capacity in California, most of the projects today are solar plus storage. So we are investing in storage at a tremendous rate. We are currently using what are called lithium-ion batteries. You've heard that term. On the right, in the middle and on the right, are two new types of chemistries that the national labs are collaborating on to develop. We're very concerned about the scarcity of cobalt, nickel, lithium, and natural graphite. So the lithium-ion battery is a great technology, but we're very concerned about the international supply chain. Only 10% of the batteries used in the United States are built here in the United States, so we want to work on creating that manufacturing capability here in California, which I'll talk about in a moment. In the middle is what's called sodium ion. So the electrolyte in that middle one uses soda ash. And soda ash is widely available here in the United States, but we made that picture a little bigger. It doesn't have the same energy density as the lithium ion. The lithium ion is a great technology, but we're very concerned about the supply chain of lithium being the next OPEC. You can think about what motivated us to do energy efficiency. Well, it's now motivating us to develop other types of energy storage. And on the right, the solid state lithium batteries those ones have a solid electrolyte. And that's also a step change. We don't have those on the market yet, but the sodium ion is going to be great for bigger trucks, and it's going to be great for grid scale energy storage, where we don't care as much about the footprint of the battery itself. It's not quite as dense, but you're going to start seeing sodium ion. There are some startups in that area, and there are also some startups around solid state lithium. So these are really important battery chemistries that we're investing in at the national labs. One of the key things we're doing these days is to try to think about what a workforce and an in-state manufacturing capability would be around these next generation technologies. There's many steps in developing a battery, and on the left is the raw materials themselves. You heard Commissioner Hochschild talk a little about what's called Lithium Valley. So down in the Salton Sea, they're actually getting geothermal brine that has lithium in it. So there's a rush towards creating ways to harvest lithium out of that brine. There's also lithium in California and in Nevada. So we have some of our own lithium resources here that there's a big investment to mine those locally. We then take the raw materials, and we're trying to develop cell, modular, and battery pack certification and pilot lines. So we recently worked with a startup called Kuberg here in the Bay Area, and when they had their technology, they had to go to Michigan to test it. California is where more batteries are being used than any state in the United States, so we're trying to create a statewide strategy similar to the Archer's Hydrogen Hub around energy storage technologies and create the awareness and the opportunity of these technologies. Once we have these pilot lines, we're very interested in accelerators and creating the commercialization plans and scaling up and buying local. But on the right, the reuse and recycling of the energy storage technologies is extremely important also. I just got an email from a colleague today that the Nissan Leaf batteries, those cars were starting to be sold in 2015, and they're reaching the end of their life. So we're going to start to see more EVs where the battery is no longer sufficient for driving. There could be second use. Those could be at homes or grid scale, but we have to create certification rules like UL has for electric systems to certify a second use battery. Before you recycle it, you want to reuse it, but there's still a lot of work to be done, and keep an eye out as CCAs for the opportunities to use those batteries in your programs, because the environmental footprint of those systems are going to be an issue. And we want to make sure we also have local recycling of the energy storage technologies. I saw a video the other day from NREL where they were just looking at little C-cell batteries and D-cell batteries, and they would crunch it up to start the recycling process. And if it had charge in it, it would catch on fire. So it's going to be interesting to see as we evaluate these batteries what we do about the recycling process. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about electric load flexibility. I have pictures here. I have 12 pictures, 2025, 2030, 2040, and 2050. You'll see summer, shoulder months, spring and fall, and winter. The grid is changing, and our loads are changing. So when you take those together, we have a huge need for flexible load. And we have been developing something called the Demand Response Potential Study, where we want to do 4 things: shape, shift, shed, and shimmy. So we're trying to create these capabilities of end-use loads to facilitate a clean grid. Today, you see that duck curve in the spring. So you can see the duck shape. The colors are different end uses. The dark lower black line is the net load, which means if you take the consumption and you get rid of the renewables, and that top line is the line for the behind-the-meter renewables. So you can see that belly of the duck getting deeper. Those shoulder months in 2050, those are the hours where we need that energy storage technology to be able to take that clean load, because we have more and more overgeneration. So we're trying to create these 4 shape, shift, shed, and shimmy. We want to shape the load with dynamic prices. We want to shift from the dirtier times of the day to the cleaner times of the day. We want to shed on those hot summer days where we have capacity problems. And we want to shimmy, which is fast-acting ancillary services, So we're about to publish phase 4 of the demand response potential study, and we study these different loads and what they can do for flexibility. A few of the colors to see. Notice in 2050 in the winter, the red color. And we're going to actually have winter peaking net load. Typically, historically, we peak between 2 and 6 on a hot summer day, but as we have more renewables, now it's 4 to 9, but we will start to see winter peaks and morning peaks. And so if we think about our tariffs today on our time of use pricing, we want to make sure that we don't just lock in the capabilities of a technology to do one thing, because the grid will continue to evolve. And this is the transmission grid. Your local grid may be doing something different. So we're trying to understand the role of flexible load in our technologies. The state has set a 7 gigawatt load flexibility goal. In our work on demand response potential, we look at what technologies exist that can be flexible. One of the ones you know about is thermostats. So we typically think about air conditioning as a potentially flexible load, and there's many smart thermostats out there. The smart thermostats actually go through a cloud, like a Nest or an Ecobee or an Emerson cloud, and then they go to a third-party aggregator or maybe to a price response system, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But we've all heard about EVs being potentially flexible, pool pumps, heat pump water heaters, and things like that. So we look at what is technically available for flexible loads, what is economically available? And when we think about economically available, does the system have the capability to receive a signal? And what's achievable? How do people participate in demand response loads? And then I also have a circle there on dynamic pricing. And I've been tracking and working with the state where they want to try to use prices to incentivize load flexibility. So many of you have heard about MIDAS, the Market-Informed Demand Automation Server. It's a big challenge. So the concept is, if we do it with prices, we want prices that reflect system conditions, and we want devices to be able to respond to prices. So the prices to devices concept from EPRI was around for 20 years. But we're at a new era where we have more renewables on the grid, and we actually help reduce that late day ramp. But what the ramp is when the sun starts to go down and there's still air conditioning load, there could be a real challenge for grid operators to maintain the voltage and the reliability of the grid when the renewables are changing, when you have intermittent supply, you need flexible demand. So the picture here shows we're trying to understand how ready are devices to use the clean energy in the middle of the day and less at that 4 to 9 period, but there may also be a morning price. So we need devices that may be able to shift twice a day, and we want to understand what's happening in the nighttime. So this is a big part of the work we're doing. The California Load Flexibility Research and Deployment Hub is funded by the California Energy Commission, and there's a bunch of technologies here. The green ones are residential, we have small commercial, we have large commercial, and we have a number of campuses. We're actually testing EV chargers at scale at UC San Diego. We have pool pumps, smart thermostats, integrated heat pumps. So today we're using the building mass as storage, but there's a lot of work undergoing thermal energy storage systems that use water or other kinds of phase change materials. I think Nostromos is here. I've talked to somebody, and they have the Beverly Hills Hilton has a new thermal energy storage systems. So we're trying to understand, if we have these systems, the human won't notice if there's a thermal energy storage system in the building that's changing their heating and cooling, but the temperature in the room stays the same. We can also use the mass of the building, but this room's actually kind of cool. So if we let it float up a bit, most of you will probably still be comfortable because we pre-cool, we overcool a lot of our buildings, and it's a big challenge. We're not very efficient in some of our heating and cooling, so we have a jacket on, and it's quite warm outside. We also are looking at ceiling fans integrated with thermostats. We actually are trying to put distributed batteries. So some of the big-ass fans, maybe you've heard of them, we're thinking about a battery in the big-ass fan, so if the power's out, there's still comfort for the people in the building. We're using AI and predictive control for many of these systems. So we're starting to have building control systems that can get the outside temperature, the price of electricity, and manage the building to reduce the bills and make sure people are comfortable. About a third of our sites are actually in disadvantaged communities. Not a lot of people in disadvantaged communities have heat pump water heaters and air conditioners. But when you put in a heat pump, you're going to have air conditioning and heating. And we want to understand how to connect with those devices. But we do know a lot of Californians still don't have internet at their homes. So they may have a cellular uplink of some sort for the devices. But this is an important piece of what we're trying to do and to reduce bills. So if you go on these bills, on these dynamic tariffs, we want to help make sure there's a guaranteed bill reduction. This is my last slide before, my second to last slide. This is around AI for grid operators. I haven't talked a lot about AI. I was at a workshop this week where we're looking at AI for energy storage, AI for grid operators. So there's a lot of ways that the grid is changing, and fires is one of them. So the people that operate the grid need real-time decision support. And there's a lot of new tools that you can think of as this next-gen technology. We're going to see AI in building controls, AI in EV charging, and AI in storage sizing and deployment. And this AI system uses a variety of AI techniques to classify the load regressions, decision trees, and provide grid operators with tools. So this is my last slide. We have a horse race, and I want you all to sort of be in the game and pick a horse or write a few. We have wind and solar, nuclear, carbon capture, efficient coal plants, gas coal, biological, bioenergy systems, energy efficiency, storage, and I think that's my last one. I've got to go back. Oh, there we go. So I just wanted to close by saying thank you so much for having me here today. We're at a time where we have all these horses, and I want to just make sure I'm acknowledging this slide is from Robert Socolow. Art Rosenfeld passed away about 8 years ago, and we had a symposium in Berkeley. Robert Socolow is a physicist in Princeton who was part of the early cohort that worked with Art Rosenfeld to launch the energy efficiency research programs across the United States. And he created this slide. He's known for what are called the wedges. And if you look at the low growth that we have, each wedge is a strategy for decarbonization. And I really like the horse race idea because we need to get on these horses and go as fast as we can. And this is a kind of a way to help people understand there's a lot of technology. And our goal, working with CCAs, is to partner with you on what is working in your portfolio and how do we understand what's coming next. I mentioned many of those energy storage technologies that are coming, second use, and some of the things to think about as we pivot towards a decarbonized energy future. So I see some of the questions, and I'm going to stop and answer a few. Thank you so much. So I've got 4 questions here. I'm going to read these, and I've got about 3.5 minutes left. Question, what reforms are important for relieving interconnection queue backlog and getting resources connected faster? I'm going to mention 2. Some of this is regulatory, so what I understand is that there's a number of steps when some of the folks are trying to get new technology onto the transmission queue, and most of that is sort of the process that we need to speed up that backlog. But I also want to mention reconductoring, because you can actually take transmission lines and double the capacity if you reconductor them. So rather than building new transmission, there's actually a good opportunity to reconductor. So that's an important one that we're trying to invest in. What challenges do you see with communicating prices of devices made by manufacturers? I'm glad you asked that. Prices, there's many ways a price can get to a device. It can go through an OEM cloud, like a heat pump water heater may have an API, but the intelligence is in the cloud. And that's one of the challenges with this technology is you actually get vendor lock-in. We're concerned about that you'll always have to go through Rheem or A.O. Smith. And that may be a good thing, but for some of the new startups that may not be there, that's a challenge for new technology. But you may have an automation service provider that has to pay a fee to interact with the OEM cloud. So the concept is it's cloud to cloud. We are using something called OpenADR 3.0, and we're encouraging the folks at the California Energy Commission and the MIDAS system to move towards a more open standard. But some devices can actually get the price locally. There's also a collaboration at Google, Amazon, and Apple on something called Matter for interoperability in the home. So you could have a gateway in the home that then distributes the prices locally. So we're going to be doing some work on, I'd like to do a follow-up with the CCAs to have some discussions about what we're seeing in CalFlex Hub. What challenges do you foresee in using AI and flex technology? The number one is sort of data privacy. So one of the things I mentioned is that we do this DR potential study, and we have 400,000 load shapes and 11 million files, and we recreate the customer data. And our report was actually a year old, and the PUC is finally allowing us to release the report, and they were very concerned about data privacy. But we make sure that the data are anonymized, and there's at least 15 customers in each group, and even fewer or more for the large industrials. But one of the challenges in AI is data privacy and whether you share your data. So there's pros and cons of sharing that. How important is the role of customer awareness for increasing load flexibility? What needs to be done to get customers involved? Well, the one thing is bills are complicated and energy is expensive. So if we can help them understand how much money they're going to save, and we can track that and give them some idea. So when you do DR programs, you have to have a baseline to measure the DR. But with prices, it's built into the bill. So that way, somebody still has to tell them, well, how much did I save compared to if I was not on a flexible tariff? So there's some challenges there. So I think I'll stop right there, and thank you so much, and it's a great pleasure to be here today.